And here we go. So we should be live. We should have audio from our side coming through, but I'm going to check anyway. Marvin and Lars, could you just say something real quick, and I'll just make sure the audience can hear you as well. All right, just confirming from the audience. No, they can't hear you, can you?
No.
Lars, Marvin, can you also just say something one more time?
Yes. Hey.
Sure.
Hello.
Hi. Hello. How is everyone?
Just give it a second. It's a little bit delayed. There we go. We're good. Okay. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining the live stream. There's always slight technical issues, and I love to make sure I get them all right. But we have a really interesting interview coming up here, and this is all live for once. I normally don't do these live because of all these technical issues, but we do have Lars Brünjes, the Chief Technical Officer of Genius X, joining us, and also Marvin Bertin, the Chief Science Officer of Genius X. And we're going to go through all these questions that have been coming up around the DEX itself, the Launchpad, and the community have put in a whole bunch of questions. So we're going to go through all this and get them all answered. So I'm pretty excited, firstly, for the Launchpad, which is launched about 4 hours ago from now. So first off, congratulations, guys, on that. And then...
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'd love to get an update of where everything is at in regards to the DEX itself, the Genius X DEX. So guys, again, welcome to the podcast, and let's get an update of where we're all at.
Yeah, sure. So for the DEX, as a reminder, this is our concentrate liquidity DEX with smart swaps and yield optimization. And so we've completely all our smart contracts. They've been audited and been approved. And then a lot of the backend infrastructure has also been almost completed. So we've built internally our own Haskell PAB from scratch. And Lars probably will talk more about that. And I really think that we've made a really amazing design decision around that PAB to really design it in a very modular way. And have really also advanced features around transaction balancing and then transaction submission and things like that. We put also a lot of effort into our backend order management system. So one interesting thing is that the Launchpad is using a similar order based mechanism as our DEX. And so a lot of the tooling and the infrastructure pipelines that we built for the Launchpad are reused for the DEX. And so this Launchpad is also a proof that this design architecture, right, is functional, is ready, and can be deployed on mainnet. And so that gives us a lot of confidence that we can then kind of use that same infrastructure to get the DEX across the board. And so yeah, and then what's missing is more like kind of like the intricacy of the integrating the UI and building out all the functionalities, and then kind of doing also a lot of kind of testing and stress testing.
Well, it's looking good. Yeah, Lars, go on.
No, sorry. No, I just want to emphasize that. I mean, the smart contracts, I always consider them as the heart of a D app, but of course it's, I mean, if you look at lines of code, it's only a very small percentage. I mean, I still think they're really very, very important. I mean, they're sort of the whole point. But I mean, if as far as work is concerned, it's only a very small part. And in principle, the smart contracts, I mean, we have had them for many months now, I think, more or less in the state they are now. So in principle, all the functionality that the DEX will have was already available if you use the Cardano CLI or whatever. But I mean, the hard work is to make it nice and user friendly and reliable under load and all these things. But as Marvin said, I mean, a lot of the components, almost most of the components that we now build for the Launchpad will more or less in the same form also be used for the DEX, particularly the PAB replacement that Marvin mentioned. I mean, this Haskell library that can be used to query the blockchain and construct transactions. That's exactly the same now that we use for the Launchpad that we will also use for the DEX. So all that work that has gone into that is then also available for the DEX.
Well, I've seen the video previews and screenshots and everything around it from a UI point of view. I think it looks quite nice. It looks very user friendly from what I've seen, and I've watched the various monthly updates as well. And encourage anyone else that hasn't seen those monthly updates to check out the Genius Yield YouTube channel and get updated on how that all is looking at the moment, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, Marvin, you also mentioned a little bit earlier some order constructing and whatnot. Is that similar to like batches, which other DEXs use, or something like that? I'm just trying to understand what you mean by that, and if you are using batching processing at all.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So actually, in the last Cardano Summit, Lars and I gave a presentation about how to build UTXO optimized application. And one of the core points we wanted to communicate is that there are certain design patterns that fit really well with the UTXO architecture and other design patterns that do not. An example of anti-patterns that we try to, that are not optimized for UTXOs are DEXs that use the AMM architecture. And AMM means that you're using pools to pool liquidity together and do trades. And to make that possible on Cardano, you need upstream what we call a batch order batcher, right? And so those order batcher add a lot of complexity and also add a point of centralization to the DEX, which we think is not the right way of solving that. So really, our DEX has been from the ground up built on what UTXOs are good at, and it turns out that what UTXOs fit really well is an order book architecture. Because an order book architecture allows you to do local transaction matching, order matching, and it has a distributed state at the core, and the price is an emergent property of the interaction of the bid and the ask, which fits very well with the UTXO approach. And so that's what we're using. We're using orders in the sense of how we think of orders in centralized exchange, like limit orders. So you place an order on chain, and then those orders are then picked up and matched with other orders and then processed. So it's a two-step process that kind of decouples adding UTXOs on the script address and then consuming UTXO on the script address. And so that allows you to really parallelize a lot of the interaction and allow you to create a scalable DEX that is actually quite simple in terms of the contract themselves. And so we really think this is the best approach to build these type of DEXs on Cardano. And it turns out that we use a similar approach for the Launchpad, where right now our Launchpad, when we run rounds, it's not a first come, first serve where you have people queuing up to buy orders. Everyone can place orders in parallel, and there's no contention issues. And then those orders are then scanned at the end of the round and filled as a second step. So this whole process of two-step approach, placing orders and filling orders, is at the core of all the application that we're building. And that's what we mean by this order management system that will be reused across application. And that really guarantees a good user experience and really getting the best of what UTXOs are good at to have, high-performing application.
Okay, brilliant. Is there anything else in the ecosystem that is comparable to this? It sounds similar to one that I can think of. Is there anything similar? And also a follow-on question from that. How are you guys differentiating yourself from other DeFi apps and DEXs in the Cardano ecosystem and broader as well?
Mm-hmm. So the other DEX that uses that order approach is MusiSwap, right, with their order book. And then what we're doing is we're pushing it a step further and introducing kind of novel concepts. The first one will be like smart swaps, which allows you to have executable logic in the order itself so that it triggers based on different conditions. And so you can start having things that are a bit more advanced than limit orders, like stop loss and things like that. And then we'll also have concentrated liquidity. So since we want to move away from pools because we think it's an anti-pattern to use a pool concept on Cardano, we're introducing concentrated liquidity that allows us to concentrate liquidity at specific UTXOs. What does that do is that it allows you to significantly increase your yield potential by concentrating liquidity on smaller price ranges, and also makes the DEX much more capital efficient. With much less liquidity, you're able to provide a more kind of fluid flow of trades. And then we have the concept of the smart order routers. And so these are the third entity of the DEX. These are people that will be scanning our DEX for orders, scanning our DEX for liquidity position, matching them together. And what's interesting with our design is that the user doesn't pay for smart order routers to match orders. So we don't have that batching fee that a lot of DEXs have. That the way smart order gets paid is by finding arbitrage opportunities on the DEX. So they're incentivized to reduce inefficiency, right, in the DEX, and by reducing inefficiency by finding those arbitrage calls, they're able to earn rewards. And so what's the nice thing about that, it really aligns the incentives of the DEX, of the users, and the smart order routers. So for example, if one pool has a lot of bots competing for arbitrage, at some point the arbitrage will go away, and then there'll be other pools with more arbitrage. And so it will the smart order routers will always go to the pool with where they're most needed, right? We think that's like a very elegant way of kind of solving that trilemma of incentives. And then lastly, it makes the DEX extremely decentralized, right? So we're not running those smart order routers, right? We don't have control over the smart order routers. These are people from the community that can run them and make money on their own. And they don't need to also be vetted, or they don't need to have initial liquidity, right? So even if you don't have any liquidity to put in the DEX, you can still be a smart order router and make some passive income like that. Mm-hmm. And so it really puts the word decentralized in decentralized exchange.
And I think it's also somehow it allows us to keep the smart contracts extremely simple. So the orders that we have at the moment, the limit orders, and also these concentrated liquidity positions, they are really very simple. I mean, the order just says, okay, I have to offer this and I want at least that. And the liquidity position is basically the same and says, okay, I'm willing to swap this against that at this price. And that's all. And they are completely independent of each other. They also don't know anything of each other. And if you had a centralized system or this pool system and had to match orders yourself, that would be quite complicated. I mean, to find somehow the best way, which positions to use to make the most profit or to make the best swaps. But by just opening it up to the whole world and everybody can compete, I mean, it's basically game theory working for the efficiency, because people have a financial interest in finding the best matches and making the best trades. So all this complexity is basically going away, so we don't have to implement it. So there's less opportunity for us to make mistakes, to introduce bugs, because everything is extremely simple. But by this interplay of the contracts and the people trying to make trades, all this efficiency will emerge automatically. And I think that's quite an exciting idea.
It is very exciting. I didn't realize those aspects in the particular game theory there, and the ability for people to come in and become part of that smart routing process. So that was a concept that probably wasn't explained to me early on. And I'm very excited about that. It takes the whole DEX to another level, I think. So I think that's absolutely amazing. So thank you for explaining that. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a lot of questions around it from the community as well. Now, I will continue on with this question list here. And a lot of these questions, for anyone that's listening live, these were accumulated and collected from the Twitter feed when we put this all out. So these are community-based questions as well. So just so that you're all aware around that. But if you have any questions, please ask them in the live chat too. So this next one here is around generating liquidity on the DEX. Now, there's a lot of, well, actually, there's quite not many Cardano native tokens and projects out there that have a huge amount of desirability at the moment. Plenty of meme coins, plenty of community-based stuff. But how are you going to try and attract liquidity to the DEX itself and attract external users from outside of Cardano to the DEX? Because that's the main game of any decentralized exchange, any exchange, is attracting the users, attracting that liquidity. How are you guys going to do that? What's the overall plan?
Yeah, so I mean, it's at the end of the day, it is a decentralized, right, exchange, and so the liquidity is not something that necessarily we have to provide. It's really convincing the community that it is worth their time to place a liquidity. So obviously, at launch, we'll have certain partnerships with other projects to kind of provide some initial liquidity in some of those token pairs. But really, our goal is to have a diverse set of liquidity providers, right, that are incentivized to join. And so I think the fact that we provide that concentrated liquidity is a real differentiator in the space. Now you're not, if you can, even if you have a small amount of liquidity, you can get significantly larger yield if you know where to position it. But it's not a strict positive, right? So every design decision has kind of like trade-offs. And so the trade-off of concentrated liquidity is that if you place your liquidity at the wrong price, or you don't regularly rebalance your liquidity, then it's not being used, right? So if it's not at a price that people are trading at, then you get zero fees. So it's more of a the fees is a bit more polarizing. It's either you're really well placed and you get really high fees, or you're not well placed and you get no fees. And AMM is kind of like the middle ground where everyone puts their liquidity together and everyone gets a little piece of the pie. So I think it's good for people that just want to put liquidity and forget about it. But I think for concentrated DEX, we're going to attract people that are a bit more sophisticated, that know where to place liquidity and know how to rebalance it in an optimal way to really maximize their liquidity. So we're going to attract more sophisticated liquidity providers. We're going to give them higher potential of yield. And then we're going to introduce people that are going to build novel tooling on top of it, because you're able to rebalance. And so there's some kind of optimization game you can do that. And that's really why we also want to build this yield optimizer, is if people do want to have kind of like this deposit and forget way of providing liquidity, then they can still do that. They will need to use our smart liquidity vaults, which then you can just deposit like it was a pool, and then we'll have our own internal trading bots that will optimize your liquidity based on like a certain trading strategy. And then you can set, the parameters of that trading strategy, or kind of like your risk level. And so you can still have that more passive yield opportunity, or like I was saying earlier, or you can have more that manual yield optimization, where if you think you know how to place liquidity correctly, you can really maximize. And so that kind of range of possibility, we hope that people are really going to like that, and it's going to attract people to join our DEX.
Okay. I just want to add that because of this aforementioned setup, that the orders are completely separate from the positions and everything is open and very simple, there's nothing stopping people filling hours on our system with liquidity from another system, for example. So they could use some other DEX's liquidity to fill one of our orders, or the other way around, use our liquidity to fill another order. So the hope is that it's not only like liquidity concentrated on our own DEX, but that somehow it's interconnected with all the other DEXs, and basically the whole liquidity in the Cardano ecosystem is pooled. So at least from our point of view, it's possible. I mean, the others may be a bit more closed in their philosophy, but our contracts are completely open to use by anybody. So they don't necessarily have to go through our UI, for example.
That's amazing. It is very similar to what MuesliSwap are doing at the moment as well. They fulfill orders on other DEXs and whatnot. So it's a very interesting approach. And I love the fact that you guys do have that yield optimizer in play as well to allow users that don't know what they're doing essentially, or very at beginner level, to be able to participate and optimize their yield, because it does sound like a lot more of a complex process. And I think there's going to be a lot of video tutorials coming out around this so that people can actually understand how to use the DEX and optimize their yield manually. But the automated yield optimizer, I think, is really important. And that isn't being launched with the DEX when you guys launch, right? There's a bit of a process to launch the yield optimizer. Is that correct?
Yeah, it will probably come as a second stage, just so we manage the first release of the DEX, and then the yield optimizer is really just an add-on, right? It's not. These are really two separate kind of products, and I agree with you. I think it is a very exciting additional tool that adds a lot of convenience. But what's also really interesting is we're thinking of opening that as well, where we could have kind of what's called social trading, where people build their own smart liquidity vaults, and then we could have some kind of leaderboard. And so people can see which vault is performing the best. And so then as a user, instead of just placing liquidity in a Genius Yield vault, we'll be competing with other people building their votes, smarter people, more talented people that really know how to do that stuff, right? And then the community will be able to just place the liquidity there, and then the author of that trading strategy will get kind of a royalty, right? Kind of like a management fee. And so that's really kind of you can see a pattern here with Genius Yield. We want to make things as open as possible. We want to make things kind of composable with other protocols, but also invite the community to be able to really build on top of it, right? We're really excited to see what people come up with and build their own smart liquidity vaults, and then make it accessible to others in the community, and kind of create this positive feedback loop.
Absolutely love it, guys. This is amazing. The fact that anyone can come in and build on top of it is, I don't think anyone else is really doing that. So that's amazing. My mind's absolutely blown. I'm pretty sure that the comments in the YouTube stream are quite amazed as well. But let's go on to some of these other questions here. Did you guys have any issues in developing past or developing through the Vasil hard fork? Is the DEX all ready for that? Have you optimized your scripts and smart contracts for the Vasil hard fork using reference scripts and reference inputs? Or I don't think you need the reference inputs, but can you talk through your development through the Vasil hard fork side of things?
I mean, at the Vasil hard fork itself, there was indeed 1 week or so that was a bit depressing when suddenly the testnet didn't exist anymore. And of course, we also, at least for development, rely on other providers like Blockfrost. I mean, eventually when we go in production, it will be our own infrastructure, but for development, we use services like that. And they, of course, also needed some time to upgrade after these new test nets were created and so on. So that was some, it slowed us down for a week or so. For your question, so at the moment the DEX doesn't use any of the Vasil features, but as you already mentioned, the Plutus part, the only feature that would involve the smart contracts themselves is reference inputs, and we don't need them, as you already guessed. So the smart contracts themselves are fine. We don't need to change them. Maybe we do have to upgrade them from Plutus version 1 to Plutus version 2, but that's basically just a formality. I mean, we don't have to change any code. We just import a different library. So the real potential of Vasil is on the off-chain side, like reference scripts, because by not having to include the validators in every single transaction that uses them, but referencing them, we can make our transactions much smaller and cheaper. So that we definitely want to use. And right now I think just this week, we basically completed that we now can use reference scripts. So there's still some features missing. I think the reference inputs are still missing. I said we don't need them, but we want to add them to our framework, our PIB replacement anyway, because it's supposed to be a generally usable tool. But but yeah, so we're almost done with that, with being able to make use of the Vasil features, and then we will change our off-chain code accordingly that the DEX can profit from that as well.
All right, fantastic. Now, you did mention security audits a little bit earlier. So it's all gone through the security audits. Who did your security audits out of interest?
That was Tweak.
Yep.
Yeah, Tweak.
Twig and Certic, yes.
Oh, and Certic. Okay. Are those security audits available online so people can review them or anything?
We haven't made those public yet, but that will probably come at some point.
Okay. And in regards to making things public, what about making the DEX code open source itself?
Yeah,
I mean, I personally, yes. I just want to say, I honestly can't. It's one of my pet hates. I can't understand how you can possibly not make it open source. I mean, the whole point of smart contracts. I mean, when I explain to somebody what a smart contract is, you always say, okay, fine. With normal human contracts, there's always ambiguity and legal issues, and you replace that with mathematics and code, and so it's crystal clear what's what. But I mean, this whole point is mute if you don't make your smart contracts public, because then nobody can check the actual logic. I mean, then you can just as well forget about blockchain and do it centralized. So in my opinion, you have to at least make the smart contracts public. So that's definitely. And this PAB replacement that we mentioned a couple of times now, we definitely also want to make open source so that everybody can profit from it, and not every project has to reinvent that over and over again. I'm not completely sure about, for example, our UI code or these things. So maybe not, or not immediately, but definitely the core functionality, the smart contracts and the framework that we use to generate transactions and so on.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really good to hear. I do love the open source approach for everything as well. So it'll be really good to see that all available, so other people can actually learn from it as well, and see what you guys are doing. Now, this question also came from the community, and this is around where the project will be in 5 years, or as Lido, from a community member in the Cardano ecosystem, where would you be in 30 years?
Yes, 30 years. I don't know if I can answer that, but I'll do my best guess for 5 years. So I think just to step back a little bit, the Cardano ecosystem and DApp ecosystem is still very young and immature. There's still a lot of roadblocks or obstacles that prevents people from building very efficiently on Cardano. I really think it's one of the few DApp ecosystem that is actually really untapped and unsaturated. So there's a lot of upside potential for the early adopters of Cardano, because we don't have some leading lending protocol. We don't have any leading kind of Oracle and stable coins and kind of some of the key components that a DeFi ecosystem would need to really flourish and become vibrant. And the reason is because Cardano's architecture is fundamentally different from the EVM architecture, right? So everything that was being invented on EVM is just not compatible. What I like to remind is when Ethereum became live, it took 5 years from 2015 to 2020 to have the DeFi summer.
Yep.
And during those 5 years, what people were doing is, for the users, there was nothing to see, but in the back end, developers were frantically building all the building blocks that led to the DeFi summer. And so Cardano is in that same stage where we cannot reuse what's been used in other DeFi ecosystem because our architecture is fundamentally different. And so we have this kind of ramp-up period where a lot of development is happening, right? Over 1,100 dApps are being built on Cardano. I think only a few dozen or 100 are actually live, right? So the next 6 to 12 months, you can expect a lot of new applications really coming in and the ecosystem maturing. And so going back to where we want to be is, we as early adopter, right, the Cardano ecosystem, we want to have a leading role in this DApp ecosystem. We really see there's a lot of liquidity in Cardano, there's a lot of upward growth, and we want to be some of the the leaders in the space for our DEX, for our yield optimizer. But as you see, Genius is really building kind of entire ecosystem. Our Launchpad, for example, is probably one of the most advanced Launchpad that out there. It combines, like the best of what UTXOs can do, but also is fully like regulatory compliant. And that just shows that we want to really set the bar of like what is the standard way of doing proper token sales on Cardano, and want to be the same thing for everything we've built with the DEX and the staking program and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's just the beginning of this big adventure, and we look forward to see Genius and Genius Yield be part of like a big part of like the growth and adoption of Cardano.
Absolutely amazing. Now, I will go through and talk about the Launchpad in a moment as well, but we did have a couple of questions that have come through the live chat, and I might just ask them now since we're on the topic of everything. So this one here comes from Clover Nodes. Is Genius building a Fiat crypto on and off ramp for the DEX?
Not initially. It's quite tricky, right, to do those on-ramps, and not just technically, but also in terms of regulations. And so we do have the plan to build our Genius Pay wallets that will allow you to do that kind of fiat on-ramp, but it's not something that you will see in the first version of the DEX.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And there's another question here about impermanent loss. It's kind of answered by the other members here, but the DEX has no or very little impermanent loss. Could you just explain that concept? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier through the order matching and why that is not the case, but could you just explain it for the audience that is thinking still from the AMM point of view and impermanent loss?
Yeah, so yeah, there's a bit of confusion, I think, on like what impermanent loss really is and what it does. Impermanent loss is really an artifact of pools in AMMs. So in pools, you have this fixed liquidity curve that as the liquidity ratio changes, the price will move up that curve. And so depending on when you enter the pool and when you exit the pool, where you're on that curve will create some impermanent loss. And it's not something inherently bad, right? Impermanent loss has shown that it actually reduces volatility in the portfolio, right? It's basically when one token goes up, you sell it into the other one, and one token goes lower, you buy it. And so it's kind of a way of balancing your portfolio and kind of reducing volatility. So impermanence is not bad. It's just you have to understand what it does to your liquidity. What we have with our order book is just a totally different system. We don't have pools. We don't have this fixed liquidity curve, right? When you place liquidity, your liquidity is traded at a single price. And so because the price is constant, it doesn't matter when you enter and you exit, right? That price is the same. You always trade at the same price. And so you don't have what's called impermanent loss. But it doesn't mean that you cannot lose value and money on our DEX. I think I want to make it very clear that there's no such thing as a risk-free investment, right? Anyone that does trading understands that when you place liquidity, right, you're making bets on the market, right? You're either bullish or bearish, and depending when you enter and when you exit, you may still experience loss. It's just not impermanent loss. It's just your regular, exchange loss that happens everywhere. So I just want to make that clear that we don't remove loss. You can still do bad trades, and you can still, potentially lose money and do back bets. It's just not called impermanent loss. It's just what you would find in centralized exchange.
Yep. And I'm very good at making a general loss on all my trades. So never ever follow me or any of my trading advice. I can guarantee you I will help you lose as much of your crypto assets as possible. All right, we got some more questions here. Okay, so this one here is around excuse me. So this one's around costly development in the general ecosystem. So we've seen recently other projects spend huge amounts of money in developing what they have developed and have unfortunately, very little to show for it. Can you comment on anything around this, what's happened in the ecosystem at the moment, and compare it to yourselves in regards to like how much budget money you guys have spent on developing all the infrastructure, the underlying code, and the smart contracts and whatnot around Genius Yield?
Mm-hmm. So I can't comment for other projects, right? I think that would be probably inappropriate, and I don't fully understand, how they manage the finances. What I can say is, in general, building software is expensive. Building software in a kind of cutting edge industry that is trying to figure out itself is also very expensive because the talent pool is very small. And so I think most people build on Cloud understand it's hard to find the right engineers. And the one engineers you do find are talented do tend to be more expensive. That also, building dApps is different than building a regular application, right? We have to build smart contracts. We have to get them audited by third parties. There's a lot of extra layers of validation and that needs to happen, right, to make sure that it's safe. So there is a lot of cost associated with it. I think we're very proud of our engineering team. We attract amazing talent, and the way we attract good talent is also because we think we're building a great product, and people are happy and excited to work with us and build what we're doing. There's a strong community, team collaboration and excitement in everything we do. In general, the proof is in the delivery, right? So I think this Launchpad being delivered right now is kind of a proof of all the work we've been doing for the past year, all the tooling, right? This is we've demonstrated we can build and execute and deliver to mainnet a functional dApp. And like what I tell my dev team, it's the first dApp is always the hardest. And then after that, especially given the architecture we've built, it will become easier and easier to build more dApps as we kind of reuse a lot of the same infrastructure. So for us, it's a big milestone. It's a proof that we can deliver to mainnet a high quality and functional application. And I think that puts us in the perfect position to continue to deliver in 2023.
Amazing.
I just want to add that this, what we said earlier about open source, that I think is also relevant here, that by wanting to make a lot of the stuff we have built open source, of course, that will help other projects, maybe not necessarily us directly, but other projects to at least not have to spend money on reinventing that wheel again. And I think that's also what everybody basically should do, to collaborate as much as possible, so that as I said, not every project has to solve the exact same problems and can instead concentrate on solving new and exciting and unique problems.
Yes. Okay. I'd hate to have to hire you guys for anything. I can see the price tag being quite high, but but thank you for making those tooling and whatnot, everything open source. So you guys are essentially the pioneers building some of these building blocks for the rest of the Cardano ecosystem to hopefully eventually use and build more elaborate things maybe in the future, some really exciting things in the future. So I'm really excited to see what all comes out of that. Now, we are talking about the Launchpad quite a bit here. Now, why the Launchpad? Well, I understand it from a point of view of Genius X and everything that Genius X is doing. But can you explain it to the audience and listeners, why Launchpad? Why are we going down this path?
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
go ahead, Lars.
No, I just want to say that, I talked to a project not too long ago where the Launchpad was that people sent one person ADA to his wallet, and then he sends them tokens back. And I think, talk to that guy, but I think it was not the only one. I think most projects have done it like that. And of course, it's fine if you trust the project, but sort of it defeats the object of, again, decentralization of blockchain and so on. So surely in the presence of smart contracts, you can do better. So, our Launchpad is basically our proposal how one can do that much safer. So with our Launchpad, people don't send money to us directly, but to a smart contract that has been audited properly, and basically they don't risk their money. They are not guaranteed to get tokens in exchange, because that of course depends on how many other orders there are and how many tokens are available and so on. But they are guaranteed to, I mean, either get their ADA back or get tokens and then the correct amount of change of their ADA. So in that sense, I think it's a huge improvement over this manual thing where somebody has to be trusted that he doesn't just run with your ADA. And then, of course, maybe Marvin can elaborate on that. What he already mentioned, it's also fully compliant. So it's not just technically from that smart contract point of view very secure, but it's also compliant with all the regulations. So that's also an important aspect.
Yeah, exactly. And like I was mentioning earlier, the Cardano ecosystem is still missing a lot of key gaps and components. And I think a good token cell platform is really crucial for thriving DeFi ecosystem. And right now, like Lars was saying, it's not done the proper way. It's done through just very simple, naive way of sending tokens and receiving back. There's no security. There's no smart contracts. So for us, it's kind of like those low-hanging fruits where we know this is a key piece of the ecosystem that will need to be built at some point. And we think we're really well positioned to build it and kind of set the standard of like how to properly build this, right? So our Launchpad is fully non-custodial. We never get access to your tokens. You place orders, and then the seller of the tokens can then fill those orders either fully or partially based on the different rounds. And everything we build on Genius Shield actually and Genius X is meant to be reused. So this Launchpad is just not for launching our token. It's also for launching any token on Cardano, right? And with the Genius X program, with over like 20 projects that we're incubating and accelerating, right? They all have the same kind of issues and the same roadblocks, and they're looking to raise funds to be able to grow their team. And so this is going to be this platform, right? It's just going to be reused over and over again for all those projects. And so we really think that's going to provide a lot of the needed funding and kind of like momentum that a lot of projects need to really go to the next step.
Yes, and I know there are a lot of projects going through the multi-token ISPO, for example, right now. And there are details around that. There are questions in the chat, but that particular ISPO is going on for, I think we're only halfway through it. So the token distribution from that won't happen for quite a while from now. So just want to mention that for the audience in general. But yeah, I'm very excited about the Launchpad and what it can provide for the community and projects that are wanting to launch. It's just a no-brainer from what you guys are building. So what about your own token sale? So I know other projects have gone through different Launchpads to launch their tokens, but of course, when you're building your own Launchpad, you have your own token sale through it. Can we talk a little bit about the details around this particular token sale? I managed to get I think the top tier one, what was called Diamond Hands or whatever it was. So I'm in the very first position there to purchase in the first round. But can we talk a little bit about the token sale so people understand what's going on?
Yes. So the token sale will be in 4 rounds. The first round starts next Monday. Each round will be 4 days each. And so the first 3 rounds will be whitelisted. So we want to reward all our loyal delegators that delegated with us right at the beginning of our journey in our ISPO. And so the ones that got these NFTs, right, will get kind of prior access to those different rounds and get to buy the token at a lower price. And then the 4th round will be for the public as long as you're able to KYC. So for every round you're doing to KYC, we do have certain constraints on the countries we can permit to participate in the token sale. And that's part of the security, right? For both for the users, so they don't get trouble in their own country, but also for the project selling their tokens, so they can make sure they sell to people that they are allowed to sell. And so, yeah, I think be able to create rounds, I think is really nice because it gives a lot of flexibility for projects to kind of design that Launchpad. So yeah, we have 4 rounds, and each round can also get oversubscribed. So each round has 1 million gen that's allocated. And so since it's a two-step approach, people first place orders. If we end up having more orders than 1 million, then we'll distribute we'll distribute the token through like a normalizing factor, so that everyone gets tokens at just a slightly lower value than they bought, and they would get their change back. So that's what we call by a partial fill. Instead of getting their order filled completely, they will get partial fill. And we think that's a very fair and inclusive way to do token sale, right? It's not going to be first come, first serve. And so like the first people that get all the tokens, if you come too late, you get no tokens here. It doesn't matter if you place an order on the first day or the last day of the round, right? Your chance of getting your order filled is exactly equal. And so then that allows us to distribute fairly the token, but also for us, it's good because it means that our token is more decentralized, right? It's distributed to a larger portion of the community, which I think will give it a lot of strength, as opposed to concentrated liquidity to like a couple of whales, for example.
Yeah.
And we also have like limitations on the amount of tokens. So it's not like one whale can come in and buy all the tokens. They are a minimum and maximum amount so that we can make sure that the distribution is not concentrated.
That's brilliant. I'm now, just with the KYC process, because is it 1 KYC per wallet?
Yes.
Yep. So I, as a user, I can't open up 4 or 5 wallets, KYC them with the same identity, or can I do that?
You can, but we have like mechanisms to kind of dictate if this is the same individual. We also have the whitelist, right? So you could create another wallet, but if that other wallet is not whitelisted, you won't be able to place orders. Yeah. Okay. And another thing we do actually in the back end is we do AML screening. So we use chain analysis to screen people's addresses and see if they've been flagged by authorities for coming from criminal activity or theft or things like that. So that's an extra level of verification to kind of like really provide as much security and vetting as possible.
Okay. I love a lot of those aspects. One, like stopping the whales from coming in like early at the very beginning, buying up all the tokens and leaving, the rest of the community with nothing. So I love that approach. Very fair distribution with your max and min limits. So a very nice approach there. Okay. Now there's a lot more questions here. I'll try and get through them within the time frame that we have here. So in terms of the value proposition of the GENS tokens, what is the token for? I know a lot of tokens, a lot of projects use the tokens for utility. It's the currency of the DEX itself, and use it for governance. What other value propositions do you guys have?
Yeah, I can talk about utility. So we try to keep it quite straightforward. So utility of the GENS token is around first staking that token into our staking vaults and earning yield on it. But the way we generate the yield, I think, is also important. The yield is generated by taking 20% of the LP fees generated on the DEX, and also taking 20% of the fees, the vault fees collected by the smart liquidity vaults. And so what that does is that the yield is proportional to the growth of the platform. As the platform grows and collects more fees, the yields grow accordingly. And so another way to put it is that we're going to pay yield. We can only pay what we're going to afford. And so we don't artificially increase the circulation supply of a token. Just in the short term, pumping high yield should be a big red flag. And as we've seen in kind of like other DeFi space, it doesn't lead to a good long-term value for your token, because you drastically increase the volume, you create a huge sell pressure, and it's really hard to recover from that. And so we want to learn some of those lessons. And so our yield is more based on how well the platform grows, and it creates a positive feedback loop where as the platform grows bigger and bigger, it creates a higher buying pressure for the token, because now people are able to get that 20% represents a bigger and bigger yield proportion. So that's kind of the first main utility. And the second one is the governance. So we'll be setting up our DAO our DAO application, and then people were able to write proposals and then vote on protocol improvements and things like that. And then we have smaller utilities around the Genius Academy. So be able to get access to premium content or discounted content around our educational articles. And then also having some exclusive perk on our Genius Pay wallet when that comes live.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Now, you did mention a little bit there about distribution tokens and inflating the supply in general. Now, there was a little bit of a talk. This is also going into a question from the community about the token distribution for the Genius Yield token itself. So after the token sale, there'll be a date when the tokens get distributed, and then the ISPO also has a certain date that tokens will be distributed as well. And this is the first vesting period for those ISPO tokens. So can we talk about how many tokens will be distributed from the token sale, and then how many from the ISPO? It seems like there's going to be a lot of inflation in the market when the GENS tokens get released. And it seems like it's all at the very same time as well.
Yeah, I can talk about that as well. So the token sale is going to be releasing 2% of the supply. So that will be the initial supply that will be unlocked at distribution. And then we have 50% of the ISPO token that will be launched in January, airdropped in January. And so that's about 8% that will be added. So it does at the beginning increase that initial inflation. But I mean, that's just part of like how most projects at the beginning always need to go through some inflation kind of initial period, especially when the circulating supply is so low, then any kind of increase, right, proportionally, it can create some inflation. But at the end of the day, you know, these ISPO airdrop was decided a long time ago. It was a commitment that we made to the delegators. The ISPO was run, you know, over about a year ago. And so that those dates were kind of set in stone ahead of time. And so we wanted to make sure that we fulfill those promises. And so one way that we can reduce selling pressure is we're also launching our staking vault application at the same time of the distribution. And so that will allow you to stake your GENS tokens right away and earn yield right away. So we're hoping that a lot of people will be staking their GENS tokens after the token sale, but also after the ISPO airdropped. And we have relatively generous APYs that I think would be very attractive.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, there is a little bit of a chatter on Twitter about the token distribution itself. So how much seed investors get, how much the ISPO gets, how much the teams get. Can you talk a little bit about that general breakdown and how you came up with that particular token distribution?
Yeah, so for the seed round, that's about 2%. So that's 2% of the supply compared to that will be released initially, compared to the 3% that will be released for the distribution. I'll need to check all the numbers here, but in total, the seed round was given 20% to VCs, but that's vesting over 2 years. And this has a 3-month cliff. So 3 months after the TGE, the VC tokens will start vesting for 2 years. There's an initial unlock of 10% though for the VCs. And then for the team, that vesting is longer. It's I believe it's 3 years, and the cliff is also longer. So it's 6 months. So for 6 months after the TGE, the team won't have any of their token vested. And after that, they will be vested on a monthly basis over 3 years. And so just to show that a lot of these token allocation, right, they vest over a long period of time and they get distributed, you know, on a regular basis, and they won't get unlocked all at the TGE.
Okay, great. I think that's one of the concerns that a lot of people had in the community, the vesting periods and when these tokens be sold, potentially sold, like VCs, investors, they want a return on their investment. So they will potentially sell at those particular dates. So I'll put notes around that so people are aware of what's going on and those vesting periods. And you guys, your vesting period's like almost forever. It's going to take quite a while before you see your tokens there.
Yep.
Now,
We believe in the project, so it's no problem.
Yes, which is very key. Excuse me. Now, in terms of trading and the launch of the DEX, we'll get all our tokens at basically at the end of this year. Now, when is the Genius Yield DEX launching, and where can we potentially trade these tokens?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first rule of software engineering is never give a launch date. So I won't do that. But I will say that we've done a lot of progress, and it will be sometime next year. Obviously, we are all incentivized to get it out as quickly as possible. And so in the meantime, our token will be available on other DEXs. I can't announce yet where that will be. And then eventually when we launch, obviously it will be on our DEX as well. And then we haven't planned any listing on centralized exchange. That will come later, but we don't want to rush that. I think there's a lot of pitfalls that can happen when you list very early in centralized exchange. We've seen kind of some horror stories. So we want to take our time, first build a strong community, a strong user base on decentralized applications, achieve high volume, and then that will make us confident to also pick, high quality centralized exchange when we do want to list.
Okay, brilliant. I do find centralized exchange listings an easy way for people to exit the liquidity. So I'm always wary of early exchange listings. So it's good that you guys are waiting a little bit. Hold on to the project a bit more. Now, that's the end of my questions and everything I've collated from Twitter and other social media channels. Now, there's a lot of chatter in the the YouTube chat as well. So I'm trying to go through this and answer some of the questions, or pick up some of the questions here. Now, I'm just worried about the time as well. Are you guys okay just to go over a little bit?
Oh, I'm okay.
Sure. Okay, brilliant. We have 60 concurrent views at the moment, so we're going quite well. Let me just start at the bottom here. Okay, there are some disappointed users that are Diamond Hand NFT holders and on the whitelist and whatnot, but they're from certain countries that can't participate. Is there anything that they can do to be a part of the ecosystem from here, or is that pretty much it? They can't be a part of the sale?
So, I mean, the DEX will be fully open, so they will be able to participate in our other application. But unfortunately, a token sale is quite a regulated type of application. As we see in the what we've seen recently in the space, trying to cut corners around regulations is never a good long-term strategy. So we take a very careful approach, and we want to make sure that we protect both projects selling their tokens, but also users buying our tokens from getting in trouble. So unfortunately, if your country is blacklisted, you will not be able to participate in this token sale. And these things constantly change, right? So it will be on a per project basis. As projects start launching more tokens, we will reevaluate which countries are allowed and which countries are blacklisted. And so obviously our goal is not to prevent anyone from participating, but we do want to make sure that we do things the proper way. Okay, thank you. Now there's a comment on Lars's book collection. It's quite epic. It is quite a backdrop. I'm assuming you've read most of those books.
But there's also a comment here in regards to Pay Wallet. You mentioned Pay Wallet a little bit earlier. Can you explain exactly what this is?
Yes, so that will be more toward the end of next year, but it will allow us to do Fiat on-ramp and off-ramp into our application. So that's kind of like the friction point for a lot of users, attracting users outside the blockchain, right? Everyone has credit cards, everyone has bank accounts, but setting up a wallet, is still a bit of a barrier for a lot of people. And so we see as like a good way to kind of bring more people to have those wallets that do that. But like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of regulatory constraints and licensings that need to be acquired, right, to do this kind of application. And so that's what we're doing. We have a very good team on the legal side that is very forward-looking in terms of regulations. And so we're working on getting those licenses in order to be able to build that kind of application.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, a lot of that stuff would take a long time to go through. So I'm glad you're doing it, though. Those Fiat on and off ramps are really crucial for DeFi in general. Makes it a lot easier for users. Now, this one here is around the Gen's price in the fourth round. And this person's wondering how that price was determined. I think it was like 65 cents or 85 cents. So I'm just wondering how that price was, how you came up with that price.
Yes, I don't know if I can share some of the actual details, but we have our financial analyst and our financial team that's done a lot of analysis and deep dive into setting up this price. Obviously, it's a bit of an art to set those prices. And so we've based on the competition and the market and what we think is a fair token value for our projects.
Okay, thank you. Now, there is a comment here from Jesper F. There's quite a few comments from you there, Jesper, but I just don't know how to formulate into a question. So if you want to just rewrite your comments there into a question, then I'll be able to ask them. I'm just looking for a couple more here. Now, Marvin or Lars, would you happen to know when the 5 ISPO tokens from the multi-staking ISPO will be released? What's a timeline around that? And I'm assuming some of those projects will also go through the Launchpad and do a token sale. But do you know off the top of your head when those particular projects will be distributing their tokens?
Yeah, the distribution hasn't been announced. We'll probably make those announcements in the next coming months. Those projects, they have the option to participate in the Launchpad, right? We're not forcing any of these projects to do anything. They have their own kind of like life cycle and business kind of strategy. And so obviously the project that do want to use the Launchpad will be launching relatively soon, actually, after our Gen sale. We want to really utilize a Launchpad on a regular basis. But also we invite other projects that are not part of the Accelerator program to contact us if they're interested also in launching on our Launchpad. We do a lot of vetting onto the project we want to launch. So obviously we don't want to launch projects that are not high quality and have demonstrated that they can deliver, because obviously every token that we launch is kind of us putting our seal of approval that this is a project that is worth selling to the community.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Now, this question comes back down to the DEX itself and the usage of oracles. So do you guys need to use an oracle? And if so, what oracle solutions would you potentially be looking at?
But at the moment, for the first phase, at least of the DEX, we don't use or don't need an oracle. As I think Marvin mentioned that briefly before, that in this order book approach, the price is just an emergent property. So you don't need an oracle. However, maybe later for the yield optimizer, we might need one, but I at least haven't thought deeply yet about which one to use, or whether we use some existing one or build our own one. But that's a bit in the future anyway. So right now we're concentrating on the DEX, and there we don't need one.
Okay, brilliant. What about stablecoin integration onto the DEX? There's quite a few coming out in the Cardano ecosystem at the moment. USDA from Emergo, JED from Coty as well. Is there? I'm assuming because it's a DEX, it's open. People can just provide the liquidity. But is there any partnerships in regards to those projects to bring in liquidity from them directly?
Yes, so we have a partnership with JED to bring in that token and have a pool. And then we're obviously open to any other stablecoin provider that will want to provide liquidity. I think for us, it's very strategic to work with stablecoins, right? There, if you look at on Ethereum, the biggest pools are always the pools that involve stablecoins. A lot of people want to be able to switch between a volatile asset in crypto to a more stable asset. And so that's what drives, we know that drives a lot of the volume in most DEXs. And so I think it's a critical part for any DEX that wants to be successful to have good relationship, right, with stablecoin issuers and making it easy for them to open pools.
Brilliant, thank you. We're coming up to the very last few questions here that I can find on the chat. There may be some I've missed, so apologies for anyone in the live stream that I did miss. This one here is around wallet support. So what wallets will you be supporting on launch? I think NAMI and Eternal, from what I can see, but what plethora of wallets in the Cardano ecosystem will you guys support?
Yeah, so right now we only have two. And it's just because of interest of time, we wanted to really launch in December. But this is something we can definitely add over time. So we have Typhoon and Flint that would be added after this. And then eventually also hardware wallets support. So our goal is to be able to support as many as possible. But right now we're just operating kind of what we think are the top two in the space.
Okay. I'm assuming Lace will be integrated in there, considering it's an IOG product at some point in time when we see it. I've seen so many teasers now. I just want my hands on the wallet and start playing around with that one. But I think that might be it. Yep. Apparently, there's a lot of questions answered on Discord as well. I have to apologize, everyone. I do have a cold at the moment. But I think that is it for the questions on the live stream that I can see here. So I'd just like to thank Marvin and Lars here for joining me on this podcast interview to talk everything about Genius Yield, where you guys are up to, and also the Genius X Launchpad as well. I'm pretty excited about this one. I'd love to see the mechanics and how this all works. I didn't get to play around with the testnet because I missed out on that whitelist. I left it too late. I couldn't get on the whitelist to have a play. But I'll have a play in the few days when it is launched. And it literally is, what, 3.5 days left before the token sale. So I'm pretty excited to participate in that, see what it's like, see what this concept, this infrastructure, this architecture, and everything you built around it in this order book style thing, how that all works. So I'm pretty excited about that. But thank you guys so much for joining me on this live stream. And thank you so much for everyone on the chat as well for joining in and asking questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us and for the questions. Always a pleasure.
Yes, yeah, it was a pleasure, Pete. Yeah, we're happy to come back anytime.
Absolutely brilliant. Okay, we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll chat again soon. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.